TCFC.
Hello and welcome back to TCFC. My name is Tom, and you're joining me for the second edition of my Versus series, where I take two teams from two separate moments in time and rate them side by side to decide which team is better. So, last week I took the lowest ebb of Birmingham's success, but this time I want to compare something a bit more fun. So, we're going to have the best of Steve Bruce against the best of McLeish. So, which game am I going to choose? For Steve Bruce, it was a 2-0 win against Portsmouth at home, which meant we'd had our best ever start to a top flight season at the end of September. Very strong team, maybe one or two injuries, but apart from that, it's as strong as it would ever get for Blues that year. And he'll be going up against Alex McLeish's team that beat West Ham 1-0 in the middle of our 14-match unbeaten run and in the middle of a 5-match winning streak. McLeish, for that period, basically had no injuries, so he had the strongest possible team. Both teams are playing really well, so it should be really interesting. Okay, so without further ado, let's have a look at the goalkeepers. So, for Steve Bruce, we've got Mike Taylor in goal. He's going up against Joe Hart. Now, I would love to give this to Mike Taylor because, especially in this season, he was fantastic for Blues. However, Joe Hart was even better. At this point in time, Joe Hart was probably... he was growing into being one of the best keepers in the country. I know his career has slid down a bit, but this moment in time, he was an absolute wall. I am going to give him the points, but I just want to say, as a testament to Mike Taylor, at this point in time, he was really rated highly. At the end of the season, he was regarded as one of the best keepers in the Premier League. If you don't believe me, just go back and watch that double save against Man City. So, sorry, Mike, but it's 1-0 to McLeish. Okay, moving on to the right backs. So, for Steve Bruce, we've got Damian Johnson, and for Alex McLeish, it is Stephen Carr. Now, this one, as you can imagine, is a pretty easy choice. Stephen Carr was an absolute legend at right back for Blues. He just was, he was brilliant. He got forward well, he defended well, he led the team as captain. Now, that's also take away from Damian Johnson, who was really the perfect utility player at that time for Blues. He played at left mid, he played at right mid, he played at centre mid, but this week he was playing at right back. And until I researched this, I'd forgotten actually how much he played at right back. And he was actually really good there. It was a position we had a lot of problems with that year, but he always did a solid job. Nonetheless, Stephen Carr is a proven throughout his career excellent right back, and although they were both captains and they both gave it their all for the club, I'm going to have to give this one to Stephen Carr. That's 2-0 for the McLeish. Okay, so next up it's going to be the first centre back on our list, and we have got it's Roger Johnson going up against Matty Upson. Now there are some similarities with these players. Both of them had really excellent seasons this year, but both of them really suffered without the defensive partners who we'll obviously come on to next. Now Johnson, he was a fierce defender for Blues. He was brilliant at getting stuck in, hitting those last minute tackles. He was just a soldier. He's the kind of person that would, run through a brick wall, which we love at Blues. Going up against Matthew Upson, who I think added a touch of class to our defence. He was really coming into his own as a defender. He was a fantastic signing by Steve Bruce. Good in the air, solid at the back, but decent on the ball. There's not too much between them at this point in time. In the future, Upson would go on to greater things than Johnson did. But I think due to his overall composure, which is something that Johnson probably lacked a little bit, I want to give the points to Upson. So that means it's finally 2-1. Team Bruce has their first point on the board. And we'll move on to the second centre-back, which is Scott Dann against Kenny Cunningham. I personally found this really hard to decide. Both of these players have got a lot of Premier League games on their CVs. Scott Dann, he was brilliant for us, absolutely brilliant, as was Kenny Cunningham. Both of them made their defensive partners twice the player, and they're both very calm on the ball. But it's almost impossible to decide, but I'm going to have to give it to Kenny Cunningham because he really was the leader of the Blues team. And I just think he's a great guy. He's one of my favourite ever Blues players. So I'm really biased in this one. So I'm going to have to give this to Kenny Cunningham. It's 2-2. Onto the left back position. And for Bruce, we've got Jamie Clapham going up against Alex McLeish's Liam Ridgewell. Now, Ridgewell was an interesting one because he was somewhat of a liability. He was very much a liability at centre-back. So we moved him over to left-back. And he was actually really solid. He performed his defensive duties well. I mean, he wasn't getting down the line very much, but that wasn't really what McLeish was after. And he contributed with a few headed goals, which was a real strength of his. So he's going up against Jamie Clapham. Now, Jamie Clapham was a man whose career was really dogged by injuries. However, everything I saw of him, I really liked. I really think he enhanced the team. He had the ability to get forward, but not in a way that exposed us to the back. He was defensively solid. Unfortunately, I believe he got shingles that year. And to be honest, we didn't really see much of him again. However, at that moment in time and at the end of the previous season, I thought he was really excellent. And even though Ridgewell was having a great season, I'm going to give the points to Mr. Clapham, which, if I'm not mistaken, means that it's currently 3-2 to Steve Bruce. They've finally taken the lead. Onto the right side of midfield, and we've got David Dunn going up against Seb Larsson. Now, when it comes to natural ability, there's few players that have come to St Andrews as good as David Dunn. On his day, he was fantastic. Obviously, he was injury prone, and at this stage, I'd say he hadn't really hit his peak at Blues, even though most of his peak was, just injury-filled spells. But he's going up against Seb Larsson, and I don't think this is a competition really. That season, Dunn was quite good. But Larsson was fantastic. He was just a club legend. Dunn was tricky on the ball. Yes, very talented. But Larsson's contributions were huge. His crossing was, Beckham-esque. It was that accurate. He scored goals from free kicks. And he worked hard. He worked like a dog, which is something that I don't think would always apply to David Dunn. And as a result, it's an easy win for Seb. Well done. So I think that brings the scores to 3-3. It's an equaliser for Team McLeish. Okay, moving on to the central midfield roles now. I have to say this was one of the hardest things to decide. Both central midfield pairings were incredibly difficult to tell apart. The first one is Robbie Savage going up against Lee Bowyer. Now, let's not kid ourselves. Robbie Savage was king of St Andrews at that moment in time. He was the epitome of Birmingham City team spirit. Now, he was reasonably good at getting forward. Not the most attacking player in the world, but what he did in terms of covering ground, he was horrible to play against. He was constantly winding up the opposition. You couldn't live in peace with Robbie Savage around. And he really helped our team in ways that we would really understand after he left. Going up against Lee Bowyer, who was going through an absolute career renaissance for Birmingham City. Bowyer is a technically very, very talented footballer. He was a favourite of mine when he played for Leeds as well. And he was in a rich vein of scoring form at this moment in time. And I would say he was a bit of a slower version of Frank Lampard. The way he would just suddenly appear in the box and hit it in there was brilliant. As I say, it's almost impossible to decide between them, but purely due to attacking needs, I'm going to put Bowyer ahead of Savage. Sorry, Sav, you shouldn't have left us. But yeah, so I think that means it's 4-3 to Alex McLeish's team. And we're going to move straight on to the second central midfield pairing. Now, I think everyone's going to agree with me on this one. I don't think everyone's going to agree, sorry. So we have got Stephen Clements going up against Barry Ferguson. And I think a lot of people, especially people who weren't watching at that period, would say that's an easy win for Ferguson. But I disagree with you on that point. Ferguson and Clements are both very tricky players. They both got stuck in, but very good on the ball. And so Clements, when he came to Blues, when that transfer window, a lot of people talk about Upson and Dougarry, the main men who really just, they're the ones who kept us up, but people rarely talk about Stephen Clements, but he was key to our staying in the Premier League. And his ability to be calm on the ball was something that no one else in our midfield really had, certainly not Robbie Savage. And, the same can be said about Ferguson in terms of their abilities. The only point I'm making is that him and Ferguson are actually quite evenly matched in their abilities, in my opinion. And they both would have fit that role perfectly. So I'm going to, for the first time ever, give this as a draw. So scores remain at 4-3. Up next for Blues, it's the left-hand side of the pitch, so we've got Stan Lazaridis going up against James McFadden. Now, I like both these players, but there's only one winner in my eyes. So, James McFadden, I'll do you first. Dependable during this season, particularly. Not the most flashy player, but very good on the ball, technically very good player. Chipped in with a few goals, very nice, educated left foot. And, he was a vital cog in that McLeish team. However, he's going up against, an all-time favourite for any Blues fan, Stan Lazaridis was a joy to watch from the minute he arrived at Blues. So there's no way I'm giving McFadden the point. The way he ran down the left-hand side, and he was still doing it this season. And you just can check out that goal he scored against Everton. He could head, he could cross, he could shoot, as long as it was on his left foot. And his only drawback is I don't think he had a particularly good work rate. Mostly because managers didn't always pick him as much as they might. But yeah, he was a absolute club legend. 4-3 to Bruce. Okay, so let's do the strikers. The first pairing I'm going to do is a technically very good pair of footballers. It's Christophe Dugarry against the late, great Chucho Christian Benitez. Now, I'll start with Chucho. What a player. I absolutely adored him at Blues, as I know everybody else did. He was technically good on the ball, very hard for defenders to deal with. He really brought other players into the game well. He particularly improved Cameron Jerome's game greatly. And, he was just, as I say, brilliant for the team. The only thing he lacked at that time was goals. I was really sad we didn't sign him. But I'm sure the goals would have come. But yeah, he was brilliant for us. I absolutely loved him. He's going up against Christophe Dugarry. Now, the Dugarry of the previous season was something special. I don't think I'd ever seen anyone as technically gifted as Dugarry. However, the Dugarry we're talking about right now is from his second season when he'd signed permanently. And something with the miss. He didn't seem happy. I think he really had reached the end of his career, and it showed. And he was still decent. He still chipped in with a few goals, but I don't know. It just seemed like his heart wasn't in it. And that's why I'm happy to give the points over to Chucho, which I think brings the score to 5-4. So that leads us on to the second striker and the final position in this list, and it is Mikel Forsell against Cameron Jerome. Probably the biggest mismatch on this list. So I'll start with Jerome. Very quick, very aggressive, very capable of occasionally scoring a really, really good goal. However, technical ability-wise, he had a very, very poor touch. He was made to look a lot better, I think, by playing alongside Christian Benitez. And as a talent, he's probably he's not really a Premier League striker. So let's compare him to Mikel Forsell. Now, Forsell's career was destroyed by injuries, essentially after this season, but the Forsell we saw that season, it wasn't a flash in the pan. He scored, I think, 17 Premier League goals. It was very Ruud van Nistelrooy-like, that every time he got near the goal, the ball was going in. He had very, very quick feet, and he's a fantastic work rate as well. Jerome did too, but it was just such a shame that he had his massive injury. But then again, if he hadn't had the injury, then he would never have come back to Blues. So I guess that's good. So quite obviously, I'm going to give the points to Mikel Forsell. And with the scores tied at 5-5, that is the end of the video. It is a draw. So Bruce and McLeish's best teams were evenly matched. Who would have thought it? So thank you very much for watching. It's been a pleasure to make it. If you enjoyed the video, give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Share it with your friends. Thanks again. Keep it on to the end of the road. Peace.